Chapter 17. The steering wheel was cool beneath Rory's calloused hands as he guided the car along the outskirts of the city. The familiar streets gave way to less travelled roads, and finally to a narrow country lane that seemed to disappear into the inky blackness of the Irish night. The headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating a path that Rory hadn't travelled in years, but remembered as if it were yesterday. Beside him, John sat in tense silence, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the windshield. In the back seat, Willie fidgeted restlessly, while Henry remained still as a statue, his military training evident in his posture even now. Rory's mind raced with memories and plans as he navigated the winding road. The weight of the situation pressed down on him like a physical force. His daughter, Thelma, was out there somewhere, in danger. And the key to saving her lay hidden in the very place he'd sworn never to return to. After 15 minutes of driving in silence, Rory spotted a familiar bend in the road. Without a word, he eased the car onto the shoulder, killed the lights and cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Willie's voice broke the stillness, tinged with nervous energy. "What are we?" A sharp elbow from Henry cut him off mid-sentence. Rory caught Henry's eye in the rearview mirror and gave a slight nod of appreciation. Now wasn't the time for questions. As their eyes adjusted to the darkness, a shape began to take form in the distance. About 100 meters to their right, the imposing silhouette of Castle Macduff emerged from the gloom. Even shrouded in darkness, its presence was formidable, a looming reminder of past glories and hidden dangers. Rory took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Without a word, he opened the car door and stepped out into the cool night air. The others followed suit, their movements careful and quiet in the stillness. At the trunk, Rory began distributing their gear. Each man donned a pack, its contents carefully chosen for the task ahead. Next came the weapons, a pistol for each of them, and rifles slung over their shoulders. The weight of the gun in Rory's hand was both familiar and unsettling. It had been years since he'd had cause to use one, but some skills, it seemed, never truly faded. With a jerk of his head, Rory indicated a nearby ridge. The men followed him, their footsteps muffled by the damp grass. As they crested the rise, Rory dropped into a crouch, the others mirroring his action. From this vantage point, Castle Macduff loomed larger than ever. Rory could make out the faint outline of windows, dark and lifeless, and the crenellated battlements that crowned the structure. Somewhere within those ancient walls lay the key to finding Thelma and the relic. "Right, lads," Rory began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Here's the lay of the land. We need to get inside and retrieve a key. It's not the relic itself, mind you, but it'll lead us to it." Willie's sharp intake of breath was audible in the quiet night. "You mean the relic isn't even here?" he hissed, his voice a mix of surprise and indignation. 3 pairs of eyes turned to glare at Willie, who had the good grace to look abashed. Rory shook his head, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth despite the gravity of the situation. "No, Willie," he explained patiently. "The relic and the key have been kept separate for centuries, precisely to prevent situations like this. Someone might find the key, but without knowing where to look next, they'd be no closer to the relic itself." John leaned in, his eyes sharp with interest. "Smart thinking. So where exactly is this key, then?" Rory's gaze returned to the castle, his mind's eye reconstructing the interior he hadn't seen in decades. "4th floor, north corner room," he said, pointing to a darkened window. "There's a bookshelf there, 3rd from the top. Look for a red and black journal. The key's hidden inside." Henry nodded, committing the details to memory. "And the guards, what kind of resistance should we expect?" His brow furrowed as he considered the question. In truth, he wasn't entirely sure what awaited them inside. The castle had changed hands several times over the years, and he had no way of knowing who might be occupying it now. "Hard to say," he admitted. "Could be anything from a skeleton crew of caretakers to a full security detail. We'll need to be prepared for anything." Willie gulped audibly. "And if we run into trouble?" Rory? His hand unconsciously tightened on the grip of his pistol. "We avoid it if we can. This isn't about starting a war. It's about getting in, finding that key, and getting out. Quick and quiet, understood. The others nodded their agreement, faces set with determination. Rory took a moment to study each of them. John, his steady and reliable friend, Henry, the consummate soldier, and Willie, nervous but loyal to a fault. They were an unlikely team, perhaps, but Rory wouldn't have chosen anyone else for this mission. Right then, Rory said, his voice low but firm. Let's go over the plan one more time. We'll approach from the east side. There's an old servants' entrance there that should still be accessible. Once inside, we make for the north tower. Remember, 4th floor, 3rd bookshelf from the top, red and black journal. Any questions? The men shook their heads, their expressions a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Rory nodded, satisfied. All right, lads, let's move out. And remember, whatever happens in there, we stick together. No heroics, no lone wolf acts. We go in as a team, and we come out as a team. As they began to move towards the castle, Rory felt a familiar tension coiling in his gut. It had been years since he'd undertaken a mission like this, and the stakes had never been higher. But with Thelma's life on the line, and the fate of the relic hanging in the balance, failure simply wasn't an option. The ancient stones of Castle Macduff loomed before them, silent sentinels guarding secrets that had lain dormant for generations. As Rory led his team towards the shadowy entrance, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to awaken something that had long been sleeping, something that might change all their lives forever. The night air clung to Rory, skin like a damp shroud as he led his team towards Castle Macduff. Every step brought them closer to danger, and with each passing moment, the weight of their mission pressed more heavily upon his shoulders. The moon, a thin crescent in the sky, offered little illumination. As they neared the castle's outer walls, a cacophony of sounds shattered the eerie silence. Voices, muffled but unmistakably agitated, drifted on the night breeze. The rhythmic thud of metal striking earth punctuated the air, a jarring counterpoint to the urgent whispers. Rory held up a fist, signaling the others to halt. He crouched low, inching forward until he could peer around the corner of the ancient stonework. What he saw made his blood run cold. In the castle's courtyard, illuminated by harsh floodlights, a group of men toiled in the earth. Their shovels bit into the soil with frantic energy, flinging dirt and debris in all directions. Overseeing the operation was a figure Rory didn't recognize, a tall man in an expensive suit, utterly out of place in this scene of manual labor. Heavens to Betsy, John whispered, his breath warm against Rory's ear. What in the blazes are they looking for? Rory shook his head, his mind racing. Nothing good, I'd wager. But it's not our concern. We're here for the key, nothing more. He turned to face his team, taking in their tense expressions. Listen up, lads. There's more of them inside. I can hear 'em moving about. We'll need to be quick and quiet. In and out, no heroics. Understood? Henry and Willie nodded solemnly, while John's hand tightened on the grip of his pistol. Rory took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Right then. Follow me, and for the love of God, watch where you step. With the grace of a man half his age, Rory slipped around the corner and into the shadows cast by the castle walls. The others followed, their footsteps barely audible on the damp grass. They skirted the edge of the courtyard, keeping to the deepest patches of darkness until they reached a small door set into the stone. His hand hesitated over the ancient iron handle. How many times had he passed through this entrance in his youth, never imagining he'd return under such circumstances? With a silent prayer, he pushed the door open. The hinges, mercifully well-oiled, made no sound as the door swung inward. A musty odor wafted out, carrying with it the scent of age and secrets long buried. Rory motioned the others inside, his eyes straining to penetrate the gloom of the castle's interior. As they entered, the sounds from outside became muffled, replaced by new noises echoing through the stone corridors. The crash of objects being overturned, the dull thud of boots on aged floorboards, and always, the urgent voices of men searching for something they couldn't find. Stairs, Rory mouthed, pointing to a narrow spiral staircase tucked into an alcove. One by one, they began their ascent, each step carefully placed to avoid any telltale creaks. The second floor greeted them with silence, the searching parties evidently focused elsewhere. Rory paused at the landing, listening intently for any sign of movement. Hearing nothing, he gestured for the others to continue upward. As they climbed, the air grew thicker, heavy with dust and the weight of centuries. Rory's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of the precious seconds ticking away. Every moment they delayed was another moment Thelma remained in danger. The third floor passed in a blur of tension and held breath. And then, finally, they reached the fourth floor. Rory's eyes immediately sought out the north corner, where he knew the room they sought lay waiting. "There," he whispered, indicating a heavy oak door at the end of the corridor. "That's where we'll find the key." They moved swiftly now, their earlier caution tempered by the knowledge that their goal was within reach. Rory's hand closed around the door handle, cool metal against his palm, and he pushed. The room beyond was a study. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, their contents a hodgepodge of ancient tomes and modern volumes. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, its surface cluttered with papers and oddments that spoke of a mind constantly at work. But Rory had eyes only for one shelf. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his gaze locked on the third shelf from the top. There, nestled between a weathered copy of Ulysses and a treatise on Celtic mythology, sat the journal he sought. With reverent hands, Rory pulled the book from its resting place. The leather cover, once a vibrant red and black, had faded with age, but the weight of it in his hands felt right. Familiar, he opened it carefully, mindful of the fragile pages. There, tucked between the leaves, lay a small brass key. It was an unremarkable thing, tarnished and worn, but Rory knew it held the power to change everything. "Is that it?" Willie asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rory nodded, slipping the key into his pocket. "Aye, this is what we came for. Now let's get the heck out of here before—" His words were cut short by a shout from below, followed by the thunder of boots on stairs. Rory's blood ran cold as he realized their luck had finally run out. "Move," he hissed, shoving the journal back onto the shelf. "Down the stairs! Now!" They flew down the staircase, taking the steps 2 and 3 at a time. The voices grew louder, angrier as they descended. Rory's mind raced, trying to recall every secret passage and hidden door from his childhood explorations of the castle. As they burst out of the stairwell onto the first floor, fate finally caught up with them. A burly man in a black turtleneck rounded the corner, his eyes widening in surprise as he took in the intruders. "Oi!" he bellowed, reaching for the gun at his hip. "We've got company!" Rory didn't hesitate. He barreled forward, shoulder lowered, and slammed into the man with all the force he could muster. They went down in a tangle of limbs, but Rory was already rolling to his feet, shouting to the others. "Run! Get to the door!" They sprinted for the exit, the sounds of pursuit nipping at their heels. As they burst into the courtyard, the night air hit them like a physical force, cool and damp after the stuffy interior of the castle. But there was no time to savor their escape. The men who had been digging were now on their feet, alerted by the commotion. Rory saw the glint of metal as weapons were drawn, heard the sharp crack of gunfire split the night. "Scatter!" he yelled, diving for cover behind a low stone wall. "Return fire, but keep moving." The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder as both sides exchanged shots. Rory's ears rang with the racket, but he forced himself to focus, to think. "This way," he shouted, gesturing towards a ridge on the far side of the castle grounds. "Follow me." They ran, half-crouched, using whatever cover they could find. Bullets whizzed past, kicking up dirt and chipping stone. Rory's lungs burned as he pushed himself harder, faster, urging his aging body to keep pace with the desperate need for speed. As they crested the ridge, Rory risked a glance back. His heart sank as he saw the pursuers hot on their trail, their dark forms silhouetted in the dim moonlight. "Keep going," he yelled, pointing towards a road he could just make out in the darkness. "Head north." They scrambled down the far side of the ridge, the uneven ground threatening to send them tumbling with each step. Sneeze protested the abuse, but he gritted his teeth and pushed on. The key in his pocket bouncing against his thigh, a constant reminder of what was at stake. As they reached the road, the sound of engines roaring to life echoed from the direction of the castle. Rory growled under his breath. If their pursuers had vehicles, this chase would be over before it began. "Up the hill!" he shouted, veering off the road onto a steep incline. "We'll lose 'em in the rough terrain." They clawed their way up the hillside, hands and feet scrabbling for purchase on the loose soil and jagged rocks. Rory's breath came in ragged gasps, his chest heaving with the exertion. But he didn't dare slow down, not with the sounds of pursuit growing ever closer. As they reached the crest of the hill, a bullet whizzed past Rory's ear, so close he could feel the displacement of air. He dropped to the ground, bellowing for the others to take cover. "Return fire!" he ordered, pulling his own weapon free. "Make every shot count." The night erupted into a firefight, muzzle flashes illuminating the darkness in brief strobe-like bursts. Rory squeezed off careful shots, aiming for the muzzle flashes below rather than specific targets. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had the high ground. It would have to be enough. But even as he thought it, a cry from his left told him it wasn't. Bullets were coming at them from the side now, a flanking maneuver that threatened to overwhelm their position. "We're pinned down," John shouted, his voice barely audible over the gunfire. "We need to move." Rory nodded grimly. "Across the field," he yelled, pointing to a stretch of open ground. "There's a tree line on the far side. We can use it for cover." They broke from their position, running in a zigzag pattern to make themselves harder targets. Rory's legs burned with the effort, but he forced himself to keep pace with the others. He could see the tree line now, its shadow, a promise of safety in the chaos. As they passed a prehistoric monument, Willie suddenly veered off course. Rory watched in horror as the younger man took up a position in front of a dolmen, his rifle raised. "Willie!" Rory screamed. "What are you doing? Keep moving." But Willie either didn't hear or chose to ignore the order. He was returning fire, providing covering fire for the others to reach the tree line. Rory's heart clenched as he realized the magnitude of Willie's sacrifice. Time seemed to slow as Rory turned, his eyes locking onto Willie's form. He saw the muzzle flash, heard the report of Willie's rifle, and then, as if in slow motion, he saw Willie's body fall. "No!" The word tore from Rory's throat, a primal cry of anguish and rage. Without thinking, he started back towards Willie's fallen form. But a hail of bullets forced him back, the air thick with lead and the acrid smell of gunpowder. John's strong hands grabbed him, dragging him towards the shelter of the tree line. "We can't leave him," Rory shouted, struggling against John's grip. "We have to go back! We go back! We all die!" John yelled, his face inches from Rory's. Is that what Willie would want? Is that what Thelma needs? The mention of his daughter's name was like a bucket of cold water. Rory sagged in John's grip, the fight draining out of him. He allowed himself to be pulled into the shadows of the tree line, his mind reeling with grief and guilt. As they huddled in the cover provided by the trees, the sounds of pursuit growing ever closer, Rory's hand closed around the key in his pocket. It felt heavier now, weighted with the cost of its retrieval. "What now?" asked, his voice tight with tension and exertion. Rory took a deep breath, forcing his racing thoughts into order. They had the key. They had a chance to save Thelma. But at what cost? And what fresh dangers lay ahead? As the night echoed with gunfire and shouts, Rory steeled himself for the hard choices to come. The game had changed, the stakes raised higher than he could have imagined, but he had come too far, sacrificed too much, to turn back now. With a silent prayer for Willie and a renewed determination in his heart, Rory turned to face whatever challenges the night might yet bring. Rory's mind raced, cataloguing their situation. They had the key, but at what cost? And where's Willie? Henry's voice, tight with concern, broke the silence. Rory closed his eyes, the image of Willie falling seared into his memory. "I saw him go down," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, near the dolmen. Henry's reaction was immediate and predictable. He surged to his feet, eyes wild with determination. "We have to go back for him." John's hand shot out, grabbing Henry's arm and yanking him back down. "Are you daft?" he hissed. "You'll get us all killed." Rory held up a hand, silencing them both. We'll pass by the dolmen on our way back to the car, he said. We'll look for him then. But right now, we need to stay put and let those swine pass us by. As if on cue, the sound of voices grew louder. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, sweeping across the ground mere yards from their hiding place. Rory held his breath, every muscle in his body tense as a drawn bowstring. Spread out! A gruff voice commanded. They can't have gone far. Find them. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the search party combed the area. Rory could feel the others' tension radiating off them in waves. John's hand never left his weapon, while Henry's eyes darted constantly between the tree line and Rory, as if seeking reassurance or permission. Finally, mercifully, the voices began to fade. The flashlight beams retreated, leaving them once again in darkness, broken only by the faint light of the waning moon. Rory waited until he could no longer hear any signs of their pursuers before speaking. "All right, lads," he whispered. "We move now, but slowly. Stay low, and for Pete's sake, stay quiet." They crept through the underbrush, every snapping twig and rustling leaf sounding like a gunshot in the tense silence. Rory led the way, his eyes straining to make out the path ahead, while his ears remained alert for any sign of danger. As they neared the edge of the wooded area, the ancient stones of the dolmen came into view. Rory's heart clenched at the sight. Somewhere out there, Willie lay wounded, or worse. "Henry," Rory murmured, "you take point. John, watch our six. I'll search for Willie." They moved with practiced efficiency, falling into the roles assigned to them. Rory's eyes scanned the ground around the dolmen, looking for any sign of their fallen comrade. But there was nothing. No body, no blood trail, not even a scrap of clothing. It was as if Willie had simply vanished into thin air. "I don't understand," Rory muttered, more to himself than the others. "He was right here. I saw him fall." Henry's voice was tight with barely contained emotion. "They must have taken him. Those bastards must have found him and taken him." The implications of that statement hung heavy in the air. If Willie was alive, he was now in the hands of their enemies. If he was dead, Rory pushed the thought away. They couldn't afford to dwell on possibilities now. "We need to keep moving," Rory said, hating himself for the words even as he spoke them. "We can't help Willie if we're caught or killed." He could see the struggle playing out on Henry Thassa's face, the war between duty and loyalty. John, ever the pragmatist, simply nodded and took up a defensive position. "Rory's right," John said softly. "We complete the mission, then we come back for Willie. It's what he'd want us to do." Henry's jaw clenched, but he nodded stiffly. "All right," he ground out, "but we're coming back. We're not leaving him behind." "Agreed," Rory said, clasping Henry's shoulder. "Now let's move. We're not out of this yet." They made their way past the castle grounds, every shadow seeming to hold potential danger. Rory's nerves were stretched to the breaking point, his body taut as a bowstring as they crept through the darkness. By some miracle, or perhaps due to their pursuers' incompetence, they reached the car without further incident. As they piled in, the tension that had been building finally erupted. "We can't leave him," Henry exploded, his voice filling the confined space of the vehicle. "For God's sake, Rory, he's one of us. We can't just abandon him." John tried to intervene, his voice low and soothing. "Henry, mate, calm down. We're not abandoning anyone, but we need to think this through." But Henry was beyond reason, days of stress and fear finally boiling over. "Calm down? Calm down? Willie could be dying right now, and you want me to calm down?" Rory had heard enough. "Quiet," he roared, his voice cutting through the argument like a knife. Both men fell silent, startled by the outburst. Rory took a deep breath, forcing his voice back to a more measured tone. "I understand how you feel, Henry. Believe me, I do. Willie is my friend too. But right now, we have a job to do. We have the key, and we need to get the sword. That's the only way we're going to save Thelma." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Willie knew the risks when he signed on for this mission, and I promise you, we will come back for him. But right now, Thelma has to be our priority. Are we clear?" The silence in the car was deafening. Finally, Henry nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Clear," he muttered. John cleared his throat, clearly eager to change the subject. So where to now, Rory? Back to base? Rory shook his head, starting the engine. No, we're headed to a pub called O'Malley's. John's eyebrows shot up in surprise. A pub? I didn't think you drank, Rory. Despite the gravity of their situation, Rory felt the corner of his mouth twitch in a humorless smile. I don't, he admitted. But today, well, today might be a good day to start. As they pulled away from Castle Macduff, leaving behind one friend and driving towards an uncertain future, Rory couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of their troubles. Whatever awaits them at O'Malley's pub, Rory knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as Rory eased the car to a stop in front of O'Malley's pub. The unassuming building blended in with the other buildings, its weathered facade betraying nothing of the secrets it held within. Rory's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he surveyed the area, his keen eyes searching for any sign of danger or unwelcome attention. This is it? John's voice broke the tense silence, a note of disbelief coloring his words. Doesn't look like much. Rory allowed himself a small, grim smile. Appearances can be deceiving. John, you of all people should know that. Henry leaned forward from the back seat, his face etched with lines of worry and exhaustion. Are you sure about this, Rory? After what happened at the castle, the unspoken name hung in the air between them. Willie. Rory pushed down the surge of guilt and grief that threatened to overwhelm him. There would be time for that later. Right now, they had a job to do. I'm sure, Rory said, his voice low but firm. The sword is here, and it's our best chance of saving Thelma and getting Willie back. With a deep breath, Rory opened the car door. Let's go. And remember, we're just a group of friends out for a late-night drink. Nothing more. The three men stepped out into the cool night air, the sounds of distant crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl providing an eerily peaceful backdrop to their grim mission. They approached the pub's entrance, and Rory reached for the door handle. The door creaked open, releasing a wave of warm air scented with tobacco smoke and stale beer. Rory's eyes took a moment to adjust to the dim interior, automatically scanning the room for potential threats. The pub was sparsely populated, as one might expect at this late hour. A few solitary drinkers hunched over their pints at the bar, while a small group in the corner engaged in a hushed game of cards. No one looked up as Rory and his companions entered. Rory led the way to a corner booth, as far from the other patrons as possible. As they slid into the worn leather seats, a barmaid approached, her tired eyes showing a flicker of curiosity at the newcomers. "What'll it be, gents?" she asked, her voice carrying the lilting accent of the region. Rory opened his mouth to order, but John beat him to it. 3 pints of your finest, love," he said with a wink, "and keep 'em coming." The barmaid nodded and retreated to the bar. As soon as she was out of earshot, Henry leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "All right, Rory. We're here. Now what?" Rory's eyes darted around the room once more before he spoke. "The sword is here, hidden in a secret compartment known only to a trusted few. We need to retrieve it without drawing attention to ourselves or alerting any of Deegan's men if they're in here." John's eyebrows shot up. "A secret compartment? In a pub? You're joking." "I assure you, I'm not," Rory replied, his tone deadly serious. "This pub has been in the O'Malley family for generations. Our families have been friends for almost as long." Henry frowned, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. "But how do we get to it? We can't exactly start tearing the place apart." Rory's hand unconsciously moved to his pocket, feeling the outline of the key. "We don't need to. The key we retrieved from the castle. It's not just for show. It opens the compartment where the relic is hidden." The barmaid returned with their drinks, forcing them into silence. As she set the pints down, Rory noticed her eyes lingering on him for a moment longer than necessary. Did she recognize him? Or was it just the natural curiosity towards strangers in a small town? As soon as she left, John took a long pull from his pint. "Ah, I needed that," he muttered, wiping foam from his upper lip. "So what's the plan? How do we get to this secret compartment without half the town noticing?" Rory leaned in, his voice low and intense. There's a back room, used for storage. The compartment is hidden behind a false panel in the wall. We need a distraction to get back there without being seen. Henry's eyes widened. A distraction? What kind of distraction? A ghost of a smile played across Rory's lips. I was hoping you might have some ideas on that front, John. You've always had a talent for causing a scene. John grinned, a spark of his old mischief returning to his eyes. Leave it to me, boss. I'll give them a show they won't soon forget. The three men huddled closer, discussing the finer points of their plan. Rory couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His eyes scanned the room once more, landing on a figure at the bar. The man quickly looked away, but not before Rory caught a glimpse of something in his eyes. Recognition? Suspicion? Maybe he was jumping at shadows, his nerves frayed by the events of the past few days. One thing was certain, they needed to move fast. The sword was within reach, but so too was danger. And with Thelma's life hanging in the balance, they couldn't afford to make a single mistake.